we've been fed this unending diet of rights and freedoms, and there's something about that, there's something about that that's so pathologically wrong, and people are starving for the antidote, and the antidote is truth and responsibility, right? And it isn't because that's what you should do in some I know better or someone knows better for you what you should do sense. It's that's the secret to a meaningful life, and without a meaningful life, then all you have is suffering and nihilism and despair and all of that and self-contempt, and that's not good. And so it's necessary for men to stand up and take responsibility, and they all know that and are starving for that message, and the message is more that that's also a good thing to stand up and take responsibility, because you're cursed so much now from when you're young with this notion that your active engagement with the world is part of what is destroying and undermining the planet and adding to the tyranny of the social systems. It's like, how about not so much of that, hey? Because it's too soul deadening. It's anti-human right to the core. And my sense instead is that, if you were able to reveal the best of yourself to you in the world, that you would be an overwhelming force for good, and that whatever errors might be made along the way would wash out in the works. And that's the other thing that you see in the Abrahamic stories, because Abraham is not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. He's a real person, and he makes mistakes, but it doesn't matter. The overarching narrative is, maintain your covenant with God, and despite your inadequacies, then not only will you prevail, but your descendants will prevail. It's like, great, that's really good news, So it's been really something to see that in this story. Genuine ethical virtue is it's the only source of resilience and strength that you have. And it's also the place, as far as I can tell, that the meaning that allows you to set yourself against suffering resides. People talk about life and its meaning, and they say, well, life is meaningless, but people never mean that, because if you're in pain or you're terrified, you're overwhelmed with meaning. It's just not the kind of meaning you want. And it's not a reality you can talk yourself out of easily. And that's particularly true of pain, but it can also be true of anxiety. And so the question is there a reliable source of meaning that you can set against that? And what's its nature, if so? And so here's a way of conceptualizing it to some degree. So I'm currently in a rather remote location in Northern Ontario. And one of the advantages to being here is that I can go out on my dock at night and I can look up and see the night sky. And when you see the night sky, when it's pitch black, you are face to face with something as near to the infinite as we can face in a prosaic day-to-day setting. And so there's an experience that goes along with that, and the experience is one of awe and wonder. And awe is a very interesting emotion. Let's say it's unbelievably ancient from a biological perspective. So if you feel awe, your hair might stand up on end. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you get that feeling, chills running down your back, say when you're listening to music that you particularly enjoy. And that's a variant of the reflex that prey animals have when they see a predator. And their hair stands on end so that they look bigger. Now, of course, they don't know that. So part of that feeling of awe is tied to our ancient mammalian heritage. It's a variation of the response we had to a predator. We're in the face of we're facing something much greater than ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so, but there's more to it if you think it through, because when you face the night sky, for example, or you confront something that fills you with wonder and awe, there's also a call to action that's sort of implicit in it. And maybe you think, well, the wolf is calling to the rabbit to be better at defending itself in some sense, to be a better rabbit, because otherwise, man, you're going to be eaten by the wolf. And when you look up to the night sky and you feel awe, there's a call there. It's part of that experience. to imitate that great thing that you perceive. Now you might say, well, how can you imitate the infinite cosmos as well? Obviously, that's a very complicated question, but you're a very complicated thing. And God only knows what it means for you to imitate the infinite when you apprehend it. I mean, in some sense, that's the fundamental question of life, is how do we adapt ourselves to the infinite complexity that surrounds us? What must we become? Well, you don't merely think that through. And I mean, you don't, I don't, human beings in general don't. We puzzle it out, and we use all sorts of information to do that. And some of these more primordial experiences that are outside the domain of strict rationality nonetheless point us in an ethical direction. And the ethic would be, you should and could be more than you are. Well, then the question is, how do you bring that to earth? How does that look when you try to embody it day to day? Mm-hmm. Well, I would say these are obviously not my ideas. They're very old ideas. Well, maybe you ally yourself with truth to the degree that you can. Maybe you pursue beauty. Maybe you pursue the love that attaches you appropriately to other people, etc., etc. And you do that because, well, I think you do it because life is very, very difficult. Gray developed a theory of emotion that's predicated on the idea that most of your emotions are experienced in relationship to a goal.
Okay.
And so you establish a goal, then movement towards that goal, or evidence that you could move towards that goal, makes you happy, produces positive emotion, whereas evidence that the goal is invalid or that you're blocked in some way produces negative emotion. Mm-hmm. So you lay this map on the world. It always has a destination point in mind. There's always a destination point implicit in it or explicit in it. So it works as subtly as this, for example. So if you walk into your room and you want to walk towards something to pick it up, and your room is cluttered because you've been careless, all that clutter manifests itself as an obstacle to your goal and produces negative emotion. And you experience that instantaneously, essentially, and automatically. And so part of the reason, that I encourage people to clean up their rooms, let's say, is, well, it's a microcosm of all this. Your room is part of your experience that you have control over. And it's easy to underestimate its significance. But that's a place you can alter. You can set it up for whatever it is that you're doing. Well, what are you doing? Well, that's the first question you have to ask yourself if you're going to set up your room. It's not trivial. It's hard.